All right, today we're tackling a big one. We're going to unpack one of the most consistent and, let's be honest, one of the most puzzling teachings of the Catholic Church. Its total ban on contraception.
A lot of things change over time, but this rule, it's been an absolute constant for nearly 2 millennia. So the big question is, why? What's the thinking behind a teaching that has stood firm for so long? So here's our game plan. First, we'll break down the rule itself. Then we'll get into the why behind it, the philosophy. We're going to look at its biblical roots, uncover a huge historical split, and finish by looking at some pretty startling predictions that were made more than 50 years ago. Okay, let's dive right in. What exactly is this unbreakable rule? Let's get a really clear definition on the table.
Here it is, the official definition. And the most important word on this slide, the one you've got to lock in on, is intended. The teaching is all about any action that is specifically and deliberately designed to make having a baby impossible.
And just so we're all on the same page, this covers the whole gamut. We're talking about hormonal methods like the pill, barriers like condoms, permanent stuff like sterilization, and yes, even the withdrawal method, which has the fancy Latin name coitus interruptus. This quote from a super important document from 1968 called Humanae Vitae just nails it down. Each and every marital act must retain its intrinsic relationship to the procreation of human life. You'll often hear this summarized as being open to life, and that, right there, is the heart of the unbreakable rule. But a rule this absolute has to have some deep thinking behind it, right? Well, it does, and it's all rooted in an idea called natural law. The core idea here is actually pretty straightforward. It's the belief that everything in nature, including us, has a built-in purpose, kind of like an instruction manual written right into it by God. And for humans, this manual is called natural law. And in that manual, sex has 2 main jobs. The Church teaches that the marital act has 2 purposes that are like 2 sides of the same coin. There's the unitive part, which is all about bonding the couple together. And then there's the procreative part, which is about being open to creating new life. Now here's the kicker. The Church says these 2 things are absolutely inseparable. You can't just pick one and discard the other. So from this point of view, using contraception creates a contradiction. The physical act is supposed to say, I give all of myself to you completely and totally. But the contraceptive action adds a little asterisk that says, except for my fertility. It's seen as holding something back, which falsifies that total gift of self. Okay, so that's the philosophy. But where does the Bible come into all this? Well, the teaching really hinges on one very specific story from the book of Genesis. The story is about this guy named Onan. Now, according to ancient Jewish law, since his brother had died, Onan was required to have children with his brother's widow, Tamar, to carry on his brother's family line. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. A lot of people argue that Onan was just punished for shirking his family duty. But, and this is a big but, if you look at the law back then, the actual penalty for that specific failure was just public humiliation. What did Onan get? He was put to death. That huge difference in punishment suggests something way more serious was going on. And this is exactly why, for almost 2,000 years, both Jewish and Christian tradition said Onan's real sin was the act itself, of deliberately preventing conception. In fact, his name became the original word for it. Onanism. And you know what's wild? This interpretation wasn't just some niche Catholic idea. For most of Christian history, everyone believed this. Let's look at how this led to a massive historical split. I mean, just look at this timeline. It's pretty remarkable. For 1900 years, you had this rock-solid, near-total agreement among Christians. The earliest church fathers, the Protestant reformers, they were all on the same page. Contraception was forbidden. Then, boom, 1930. The Anglican Church made a change, allowing for exceptions. And after that, pretty much every other Protestant denomination followed. And we're not talking about some mild disagreement before 1930. Get this. Martin Luther, the guy who started the Protestant Reformation, called it an exceedingly foul deed, far more atrocious than incest and adultery. I mean, wow. That shows you just how seriously this was taken. And John Calvin, another giant of the Reformation, was right there with him. He called it a monstrous thing. This historical unity among all Christians is pretty striking, and it really sets the stage for where things are today. Which brings us right up to the present. As it stands, the Catholic Church is basically the last one holding the line on what was once the universal Christian teaching on contraception.
Now, remember that 1968 document, Humanae Vitae? Well, it didn't just reaffirm the old teaching, it also issued some very specific warnings. Let's take a look at what it predicted would happen if this teaching was widely ignored.
So, back in 1968, right as the sexual revolution was kicking into high gear, Pope Paul VI made 4 specific predictions about what would happen to society if contraception became the norm. And here they are. First, he predicted a general lowering of moral standards and more infidelity. Second, that men might lose respect for women and start to see them as just instruments for their own pleasure. Third, that governments could use contraception as a way to impose their will on the population. And fourth, that people would start to think of themselves as the ultimate masters of their own bodies, rather than as caretakers. The argument then takes it one step further. It suggests that this contraceptive mentality is what really opened the door for the acceptance of abortion. The logic is that if you're trying to prevent a child at all costs, and the contraception fails, that child is more likely to be seen as a problem to be solved, rather than a gift to be welcomed. So, in the end, it doesn't matter if you see this as a timeless truth or a rule that's long past its expiration date. Its stubborn consistency forces all of us to grapple with a really profound question. What is the true purpose of human sexuality?